I was told by a close friend that I should write my experiences down, but I've done that already, so I decided I would post this here. I by no means am a writer, so I deeply apologize. I'm only posting here because I know more people will see it, and there would be a chance someone will understand somehow. You don't have to take it seriously, but know I would greatly appreciate it if you would just read my experience that we weighed in on my life so much. Many women fear being followed, kidnapped, or murdered. I was and am no different, though I couldn't fully comprehend the true weight of the fear. I never trusted older men, and I always tried to keep myself from situations that I thought would put me in harm's way. My mother was a victim of sexual assault at a young age and always tried to teach me the dangers that obsession can cause. She would get unnerved at any sign of danger and tried to shelter me from anything and everything she could. My dad understood her fear, but always tried his best to advocate for me. I learned to keep information from my parents to avoid more restrictions in my life. I eventually started sneaking out more, getting into more trouble, and becoming more risky with my actions. Those were the mistakes my mother tried to shelter me from. I should have listened. I was born in Arizona, but when I was 5 years old, my parents moved us to a town in Pennsylvania for my dad's work. I was too young to really care. It was a really nice neighborhood. My neighbors were kind, my dog, Cooper, loved the extra space, and the school district was good. My parents tried to choose the best they could afford for me to have a good start. When I started kindergarten, I almost immediately made friends with Marcus. Marcus and I were best friends all through school. We would spend every day together, mostly at my house. He thought my mom made great snacks. I trusted him with everything. He was mostly the reason I got the backbone to sneak out anyway. Marcus was definitely a more outgoing person than I was, and was always doing something he wasn't supposed to. For example, when we were 16, he was trying to sneak over to my house and fell out of his bedroom window, breaking his arm. So he was definitely a big help for me growing up. One night when we were 7 or 8, we decided to camp in my backyard. We thought we were so cool to spend the night without either of our parents. We had everything we needed: pillows, flashlights, and candies. After my mom checked up on us before going to bed, Marcus set up his blanket volcano, which was just taking all the blankets and forming a shield around himself, before getting ready to scare the shit out of me with ghost stories. Marcus was always big on scary stories when he was younger, and I was always the victim of it. One time he even made me throw up out of fear, though my mom told me it was probably just a bucket of candy I ate 30 minutes before, but I digress. He threw story after story until midnight, when we were huddled in one sleeping bag, shaking and jumping at every sound we heard. Eventually, Marcus got bored of being scared and got the munchies. He opened the lunchbox my mom had packed for us so we didn't have to wake her up for food at 2 in the morning. He pulled out food for both of us and we were eating our sandwiches when we heard a gurgle coming from the street behind my backyard. Marcus shot up. "Did you hear that?" he said in his slight southern accent. "Yeah, well, what was it?" "I don't know, maybe a cat?" "Cats don't make that much noise," I said dismissively. "Well, why don't we go see?" he said, crawling out of his sleeping bag. "Wait, I don't want to leave the backyard. My mom will get mad at us." "Then don't tell her," he said, smirking. He leaned over to his little backpack and grabbed 2 flashlights. He stood up before throwing on a hoodie and unzipping the tent. He held out his hand for me to join. I thought for a moment. I really didn't want to leave, but I knew if I stayed close to the fence, it would be fine. So I jumped up and we walked to the back gate. Marcus unlocked it and it creaked loudly as we opened it. We paused, listening to see if my mom would come out. After nothing, we walked out to the street behind my house. We stepped onto the sidewalk. It was cold on our feet, and I could see that it was starting to rain. I put my hand up and felt the water drip onto my hands. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, trying to relax myself from the feeling my mom would somehow find out we snuck out. I looked up at the houses across the road. Our lights were off, like all of them, not even a single porch light. And it was so dark that we could barely see what was under the street lights. I felt the chill go up my spine. I crossed my arms. "Marcus, let's go back inside," I said. He ignored me and walked further into the road. He flipped his flashlight on and whipped it around in every direction possible. We stood there in silence for a while, waiting for something to happen, but nothing did. I could hear whistles of the wind brushing through the branches. It was starting to pick up, and the rain was coming down a little harder. "Oh man, I'm cold. Let's go back inside," Marcus huffed. He flipped his flashlight off and started to walk past me. I started to turn around before something in the dark caught my eye. I looked over to see whatever I thought I saw. I squinted until my eyes adjusted to the darkness. Across the street by one of the houses was a man. He was tall and thin, but that's all I could make out of his appearance. He wasn't moving and I couldn't see him too well. He was standing between the gap and a streetlight, but I couldn't hear his breathing. It wasn't rhythmic at all. It was heavy and fast. Too quiet and slow. "Marcus," I whispered before grabbing his sleeve. He turned around. "What? I don't see anything." "Between the houses," I whispered. He walked next to me and I heard him take a breath. "Who is that?" "You know them?" he asked. "I don't think so." "Do you think he can see us?" "I can't tell. I'm scared. Can we go inside?" I nodded. I remember my mother always told me to be polite and to avoid embarrassing strangers. She said to me that the embarrassed man was the most dangerous one. I didn't understand what that meant, but I never wanted to risk it. I waved at the stranger. The stranger stood there for a minute before lifting his arm and waving slowly. Even though he was far, I could see his arm was shaking and spazzing. He waved for too long before he put his arm down. What was wrong with this guy? I saw he took a step forward. His balance was off, and he seemed a little ill. He leaned to the side a bit, as if one side of his body was heavier than the other. "Billy, we should go." He tugged at my sleeve lightly. I turned my head a little, keeping my eyes on the man. I saw he took another step. "Good night, sir," I yelled. The man stopped and again raised his hand and waved. I waved back quickly before Marcus took my hand and ran back inside the yard. Made sure we locked the gate behind us and Marcus went straight back inside the tent. I moved to the left a little bit and watched the man through the small hole in the fence. He stood there for a moment in the middle of the road. The rain started to come down a lot more. I could see that his clothes sunk as he got sparked in water. I saw him walk to the sidewalk and looked from left to right. He was looking for where we went. He started to walk in the direction slowly, still limping. I closed my eyes and I hoped that Marcus wouldn't say anything. I heard as the man grew closer and closer, hearing his uneasy breathing and limping steps. Then, they stopped. I opened my eyes and peeked through the hole. He was standing right there, looking towards the fence. I looked up, but I obviously couldn't see him. I peeked through the hole, holding my breath. He stood there for only 30 seconds before he started to gurgle a little. He leaned down and I moved to the left of the hole as quickly and quietly as I could. I shut my eyes, hoping he didn't hear me. My heart was pumping so hard that I could barely hold my breath. I could hear it as he put his mouth right up to the fence. "Billy." I heard his tongue click against the top of his mouth. Before he let out a groan, I looked up to the tree above me. I heard it starting to move before Cooper started to bark. It must have scared the man, because he started to walk away. I leaned back and watched as he walked across the street and in between the houses until he was completely out of sight. I rushed back into the tent and jumped into my sleeping bag. "What took you so long?" "I watched a man through the fence," I said, shaking, trying to catch my breath. "What was wrong with that guy?" Marcus said. "Maybe he was on drugs or something." "Maybe." We talked for a while before going to sleep, but that didn't last very long since we kept getting woken up by what sounded like every dog in the neighborhood barking consistently throughout the night. Eventually, we decided to go back inside the house and sleep in my room. Which I'm not sure was the best decision anyway, since Marcus was a blanket hogger, and I woke up cold and on the edge of the bed. The next day, we were eating dinner with my dad. Came home early from hunting. He wasn't very good at it, and mostly caught 2 rabbits in 1 year. But this time he brought home a deer. He came in smiling brightly. He was excited. He'd never caught a deer before. He's been hunting his entire life. Mom, Marcus, and I embellished him with special treatment, heightening his ego ever so slightly. Yeah, there's a whole horde. They were running so fast I was surprised I got one. "Running? How many?" my mom asked nonchalantly. "Oh, it looked like the whole damn forest." My mouth opened at his curse words. "Language," my mom announced. "The whole forest seems like an overstatement," she continued laughing. "It's not. It was the wildest thing I've ever seen," he said, sounding a little concerned. His face reading of memories. He looked back up at me, snapping out of whatever reality he was stuck in. He smiled. "You and I should go sometime. Maybe you'll be my lucky charm. Help me catch something new." He roughed his hand through my hair. "You hear that? You're gonna create a new species," my mom said, pouring chili into all of our bowls. "It's gonna have 8 arms and sharp teeth," I said proudly. Marcus scrunched his nose. "Geez, kiddo, making some monsters over here," said my dad. "Monsters aren't real," I said. "Yes, they are," Marcus yelled. Yeah, I trust Marcus on this one, my dad shrugged. Oh, don't. There was a thud. We all shot to look at the door. My mom looked at my dad. You expecting someone? She asked. No. Seeing the discomfort and concern on their faces made my heart drop. My mom stood up. She walked to the door looking through the peephole. She looked back at us. There's no one. She looked out the peephole one more time before opening the door. She shrieked before stepping back a little. My dad hopped up to join my mom's side. I got up to walk over, my parents insisted we didn't. I asked what was on the porch and they wouldn't respond. Frustrated, I walked into the window in the kitchen and peeked out, hoping I would see what was out. But it was too dark to see. I walked to the dining room. My parents were on the phone with someone. The person on the other side asked a question, and my parents closed the door before walking to the other room. I waited until they were out of view of the door and slowly creaked it open. It was a dead cat. Its stomach had been torn in half and its heart lay in front of it. Blood covered the porch. Soaking in the wood, its eyes were bulging, and I could see its exposed bones. I looked at its neck to see a blue collar. I clasped my hand in horror and slammed the door shut. My mom heard the door and walked to me. She pulled me into a hug and tried to get me to calm down, but she couldn't. I couldn't stop shaking. I had never seen anything like this. I didn't even know an animal was capable of that. As I said to my mom, she had just held me tighter, staying silent. I realized now that it wasn't an animal. I wish I could go back to believing things like that. I ran up to my room and shoved the covers over myself. I heard my mom tell Marcus to run upstairs and he asked me all night what I saw, but I didn't tell him. By the time he left, the cat was gone, but the stains remained on the wood. The cat wasn't the last animal I had received on my porch, and this went on for years. Every once in a while, there'd be another small animal on the porch. Cats, dogs, foxes, skunks, and squirrels. All their stomachs were ripped open and their hearts placed ahead of them. Every time I went out, I had to take Cooper, too. Cooper wasn't the most dangerous dog, he was just a husky, but I guess it was better than nothing. It was nice taking Cooper for walks. Most of the time, I made Marcus hold the leash since he was a much faster runner than I was. So whenever Cooper broke off the leash, which would happen all the time, I didn't have to run after him. After a few weeks of his, though, Marcus got me a new leash. Eventually, my dad started keeping Cooper outside. I was a little disappointed. He would usually stay in my room. But he was getting upset like every night, but it was still nice having him at the end of the bed. Cooper would bark every time the animal showed up and soon it stopped. I'm not sure what we did, but thankfully it was over. And that's what we hoped for. Around 2 months after the last animal, I woke up to Cooper barking. I was used to it, so I put no thought to it and rested my head back onto my pillow. I was in the process of going back to sleep when it stopped all of a sudden. Like, dead stopped, as if someone passed him or something. I lifted my head a little bit. Cooper would bark for at least an hour on most nights, so I thought this meant something was wrong. I got an ache in my heart and started thinking the worst. I would see him out on the porch, that Cooper was killed. But then it continued. It eased my stress almost immediately. Now, fully awake, I decided to get up for some water. I pushed my blankets aside, stretched, and got out of bed. The floor was cold and my feet recoiled at the touch. I had jumped back on before leaning over to grab the socks in my dresser next to me. I got out of bed and walked to the window. Cooper was still barking, not even stopping for a second. I listened for a second and I thought it was weird. And that I must have been mishearing. I mean, he had to be breathing at some point. I pressed my ear to the window and listened. It sounded like it was being repeated, over and over and over. My brows furrowed and I looked down at the front lawn, but I didn't see him. I looked down the street thinking that he had broken off the leash, but I saw darkness. Each lawn was only lit by a warm porch light. I looked back at my lawn and the leaves were blowing around in a circle before spacing out in every direction. Cooper's barking continued, but I still couldn't see him. I opened my window and leaned my head out. Cold air flushed into my room. My hair blowing into my face, it was so cold out. I felt bad and figured this was why Cooper was barking. I called his name and he didn't come out, but I heard him moving around. I closed my window a little, distraught. I didn't want to leave him out there. I walked to my door and opened it slowly. I waited to hear any movement from my parents' room. After a few moments of silence, all I could hear was the ringing in my ears. I opened the door, dressed it away, and snuck downstairs. All the lights were off, so I could only see what was illuminated by the moonlight. I shuffled my way to the front door and peeked through the curtains. I could hear the wind blowing from my inside and saw the flags on the neighbor's porch blowing frantically in all directions. I looked expecting to see Cooper, but I didn't. Even though it sounded like he was right in front of me, I looked out almost every window in the house. Cooper was nowhere to be seen. I contemplated what to do. Mom always told me to never open the door, but I saw that no one was there, so it was like nothing could get inside. So as I approached the door, I made sure to listen for anything, but there was not a single sign of life other than Cooper. I cracked the door open and listened. He sounded wrong, like he was sick or something. His voice sounded like he was morphed or something. I opened the door a little wider and called out for him. The barking stopped. "Cooper, come here, boy," I timidly said as I heard rustling. "Cooper, come on in," I said. I saw a shadow pop from the bushes, his eyes reflecting from the moon. I smiled at her and leave. I put my hand out, but I pulled it back a little. Something was off as I looked at him a little longer. His eyes were too big. Too human. I squinted. He didn't even look like himself at all. It looked like a suit. His fur was too thick. I could see the outline of it, and it looked tangled. This wasn't Cooper. Keeping my eyes on whatever the hell was in front of me, I leaned over trying to find the light switch, but my hand just couldn't find it. I saw him move closer. The moon started to light it. What was I looking at? I glanced over quickly at the wall and flipped the switch on, but when I looked back, it was just an empty bush. I didn't even hear it move. Where did it go? My hands tensed as I gripped the doorknob, darting my eyes across the lawn. I got nervous and shut the door, locking all 3 locks. I skipped getting the glass of water and just went back into the room, locking my bedroom door as well. A few minutes after I got in bed, I heard barking from my side of my house below my window. The barking went on until sunrise. The next morning while eating breakfast, I told my parents about it. They looked at me like I was lying. "You sure you weren't just hearing wrong?" my dad said skeptically. "What do you mean?" I heard him. I heard barking right outside the door. My dad raised an eyebrow. I opened the door to call him in, and I heard him rustling outside. Hell, I saw him. "Billy, you were just dreaming. Cooper was down in the basement tonight," my dad said. My heart sank. What? No, I heard him. Hell, I even saw him. I could see my mom believed me more and more with every word I said. I told her about how strange he sounded and how he didn't look right. She looked at my dad and they told me to go up to my room. I didn't know why they were mad at me. I thought that was Cooper outside. It sounded like him. I brushed the thought off and leaned by the doorway listening. All I could manage to hear clearly was using his voice to get her outside. I was confused by what that meant. I probably just misheard. It had to be Cooper or at least a dog. It sounded too real to be a recording. I walked downstairs and told them I wouldn't go out at night anymore, but it didn't matter. They sold Cooper the next day. I was devastated for months.